All right, from the top. So this customer came to us. It's a 2020 Civic Si, and Shade Tree mechanic installed a turbo, and he thought that the turbo oil feed looked twisted, which I'll send you a picture so you can put that in there. And the turbo wouldn't spool. So we went and drove it, confirmed the car felt like bugged. You were idling. It was weird. So we decided, you know what? Let's go ahead and pull the intake pipe and check the turbo because it didn't seem right. And I was kind of like, I feel like this sucked something in, maybe a rag or something like that.
All the bolts were loose as well.
Yeah, the bolts, the turbo bolts, the wastegate, all of that. The wastegate wasn't adjusted, electronic. It was a nightmare. So we took the charge pipe or the intake pipe off inlet to the turbo, and they had actually, I assumed that the guy was trying to do his best to keep the turbo clean, and he took the blue shop towels and basically wedged a ball right into the turbo inlet.
We'll insert a picture now.
We'll insert a picture. And I guess he was trying to do his best to keep stuff out of it, and he did a good job because air wouldn't get into it. So it was literally perfectly just mushed into the impeller. So what we did was we went ahead and removed that and went through and double checked all the bolts were tight, and we straightened out the oil line. It seems to be fine. We were able to straighten it. The kink didn't seem to damage the line, even though it looks like it did. And the car got into boost and everything else. As soon as it got into boost, the clutch, you could tell the clutch was just slipping.
Yes.
So the customers brought it back and wants us to do a clutch. So we have the old one here, and this is going to be a little bit different because this is actually a conversion kit by, what is it, RV?
Rev 6.
Rev 6?
Yeah, Rev 6.
So it's actually a Type R Exetti clutch, and it's the 1.5 conversion to run a Type R clutch.
And it's a single mass. The OEM Civic Si flywheel is a dual mass. It's very heavy. This is also not as light, but
this is going to hold much more power. It's going to be a lot better for this build.
And it's going to allow use this type of clutch, which is not very harsh on the pedal. The durability is going to be much better than getting an aftermarket, let's say, stage 2 clutch to hold the extra boost that he's going to get with the tune and the bigger turbo that he's got.
And you could just see that this disc, it still has a little bit of, it still has meat on it, so to speak.
It doesn't hold any torque.
It doesn't. You can see like it's been hot spotted, and it's not. Definitely not holding the power. So we got the trans already down. We're ready basically to bolt the flywheel in place. It still does have the protective oils on it from factory to keep it from rusting. Obviously that's going to be brake cleaned off, and I believe it comes with it has flywheel bolts, which I believe they're slightly different from the factory ones because it is a conversion. We also have an OEM throw-up bearing here. So
it's definitely going to hold torque, and it's going to feel like OEM. It's actually a very nice kit, this one. So any other Civic Si that we get in the shop, we're going to recommend this unless they're planning to go 400, 500 horsepower.
Okay, so we're back with this Civic Si that we're putting the Type R conversion clutch in. And I just wanted to kind of go over a couple things that I feel like really sets us apart from most shops. Myself and Ricky and myself, we both worked at car dealerships, and the way that it's structured is it's hard to like really be passionate or put the effort in that you want to put in without really getting like, you know, stacked up or in trouble literally. And that's one thing that I just love about working with Ricky and Fuji-San. I can spend the time that's necessary to make sure the car is 100%. And that's really big with me, is like I'm very meticulous, and I want to make sure that the job's done right and not just rushed out the door. And I just wanted to go over a couple things that on this job specifically that is typically overlooked by other shops. One thing is typically with a clutch that's worn, you're going to have a lot of fibrous materials and dust and dirt and debris that from the clutch and just overall the mileage and everything else. And a lot of shops, they don't take the time or effort to like clean that debris out. And it's really necessary because as the new clutch is in there and there's a lot of turbulence and wind, you don't want that debris getting into your new clutch, and that's even in the instructions, but most people just ignore it. Take the extra time if you're doing a clutch, grab a couple cans of brake clean. It's not that expensive. You might have 20 bucks in, a handful of brake clean cans, and just make sure to put some safety glasses on and a mask. You really don't want to breathe this stuff in. But if you look, it doesn't have to be spotless to the point you're scrubbing it with the greaser, but you want to make sure that there's no loose material. Everything here is brake cleaned. Another thing that I like to do, and I'll show you on the trans, is I take a nylon brush on a drill and I clean this surface. You want to make sure this mating surface is as clean as possible. Over time, it can you can get corrosion buildup, and when you mate the trans back to that, you want to make sure that transmission and that engine is as flush and square as possible. You don't want gaps in there. You don't want debris being pinched in there. If you come to the trans here, you can tell like this is very clean. It only takes a few minutes to brake clean this out. You can kind of take your hand with a glove and work into the little corners and stuff, but just make sure you have all that fibrous material out. The throw out surface here, you can see it looks as though it's worn. There's no grooves here, but this is just from normal wear. Well, again, a lot of debris builds up in here. If you don't clean that off and you put a new clutch, the new clutch is going to have a different engagement point where that throw out bearing is. And you're gonna run into that throw-up bearing potentially binding on that debris or getting hung up or stuck. This specific conversion actually has you remove the pivot ball. And it's always good to inspect these things because like on Subarus, you'll actually get where the pivot ball will wear on one side. This one's in good condition. This takes a spacer because it is a conversion. Where the engagement point is on the clutch and the spacing on the flywheel, this needs a spacer to bring that arm out so it can get the right leverage and the right pivot that it needs to be able to disengage and engage the clutch. So if we want to come over here, I'll go ahead and show you another thing again, this is kind of specific to Subarus, but on this Honda is a good example just to kind of look. You want to clean this clutch fork. You want to be able to inspect it. You want to see if there's wears or cracks or grooves in these surfaces that ride. This is where your slave cylinder piston rod engages and disengages the clutch. You want to make sure that's cleaned out and nice. We're going to grease that later. Same thing here. This is where this pivot ball rides. That's going to get greased. You want to make sure there's no spider cracking or cracking. On Subarus, this can actually crack and essentially blow out the backside of this arm and you'll lose your clutch. On those, we upgrade the arms to billet. So the spring here is inserted here and holds this ball, and this is what keeps the fork from just falling into the trans. And this goes into your throw-out bearing, and these surfaces get greased, and this rides on that shaft I was pointing out. And then when you're doing a clutch, you want to make sure that like cleanliness is key. This flywheel comes with a coating of oil on it to prevent it from rusting in the packaging, and you want to brake clean this off. Both sides, brake clean it off, be thorough. Once it's brake cleaned, I normally will set it off to the side. I'll make sure that these holes are blown out just in case there's any remaining brake clean or dust. And then once I bolt this and torque it into the engine, I will brake clean this again. And what I use are these cheap microfiber towels. I get them on sale when they go on sale at Harbor Freight. I'll take one of these, brake clean the surface and lightly wipe it and make sure I don't leave any fibers anywhere else to get caught in that clutch. You think you're being clean, and if you use one of your other shop towels with grease on it, and you brake clean it, and you spend all this effort to do it, and then you wipe it down, you transfer that grease onto that surface, and you're potentially creating a greasy surface on a clutch disc that could potentially cause slippage. We got that spacer for the pivot ball here, which in this kit, it's very important that you put this spacer in. This spacer washer is going to go on that pivot ball, and this is going to be torqued into that case. One thing that I like to do with my torque specs is, even though they're listed on this paper, normally there's an old box or, the box that this stuff comes in. Just for quick reference, to try to keep everything smooth, I normally will write these measurements down and just mark what it is. Like pivot ball is 21 foot-pounds, flywheel is 91, pressure plate's 19. I just kind of write these on. That box is going to get thrown out when the job's done, but it's just a real quick visual to make sure I'm doing everything right. It's good to have a Sharpie around to be able to mark your bolts once you torque them. You just mark, put a little line. That's not going to hurt anything. Another thing that, like I was saying up there, as far as cleaning the surfaces, I have this nylon brush. These are fairly cheap. They do a really good job of cleaning aluminum without really damaging any surfaces. It's good for removing RTV too, once you remove it with a razor, and you can kind of just clean up the surface here. And if you want to come back around here, I'll show you this, even though this is a fairly new car, you can see that you get this like aluminum oxidation on these surfaces, and it may not seem like much, and you know, you might get away with bolting it back together and everything else, but personally, that's unacceptable for my standards. Again, it's one of those things like a little bit of brake clean and a couple minutes with a drill, and this surface, it literally takes seconds to do this. I'm just gonna come in here, make sure to get this surface here. And I'm gonna go over this off camera just for time's sake, but you basically, you know, hit that surface, get it clean. It's not damaging the aluminum, and it cleans that little bit of oxidation off. And typically what I like to do is put a tiny bit of grease on the dowel pins when I go to put the trans back in. But coming back over here, we're gonna go ahead and get this clutch fork, this pivot ball installed and torqued, and get the throw-out bearing and pivot ball spring all back assembled onto the transmission before we even torque the flywheel. This way there's, you know, you do that step first or you're gonna have a bad day, just like the instructions say. If we miss this washer, you're gonna have to pull the trans out and potentially damage something. So get that out of the way first. That way the trans is ready to go. Then we'll move on to getting this flywheel torqued and the pressure plate aligned and torqued as well. And I'm gonna go over what I like to do as far as greasing. You know, most cars nowadays rev easily to 6,500 or higher. And that input shaft and that clutch is spinning at 6,500. And any excessive grease that's on that input shaft or in that clutch disc, no matter what, is going to wanna sling itself out by centrifugal force. And I've taken clutches out that people have basically slimed the spline with, and it slings it all into the clutch disc, all over the flywheel surface and the pressure plate, and that clutch will slip. Might not slip right away, and it's going to shorten the life of that clutch significantly. So I'll go over that shortly too. Let me get this put together and I'll be right back with you. This is the throw-out bearing and fork. I've already greased it. These points are not spinning, so you can put a little bit more grease in here, but too much grease really isn't doing anything because it's potentially just gonna collect more dirt. So the way this spring works is you're gonna slip this bearing in and it's gonna snap into that ball. I lightly greased this where this throw-out bearing rides, and I lightly greased the throw-out bearing. So this is going to go just like this. It's gonna come in like that, and then we're gonna slip it into the throw-out bearing boot and kind of over the input shaft, just like this. And once you get that throw-out bearing put like this, you're gonna kind of push forward and snap it into place. And now that fork is locked in on that spring. And you just wanna make sure it's actuating. Any little bit of excess grease, just kind of wipe off the tip here. And then we're gonna lube up the splines. Okay, so I switched gloves. This way I'm not gonna contaminate the clutch disc. And we're gonna go ahead and lube these splines. The little lube they give you. So what I normally do is I just put a little bit on both sides. And I know this is gonna look excessive, but just hear me out. And I'm going to come over here and put it on these splines. Again, this is a lot, but most of this isn't going to stay on there. So I got that on there. And I'm also gonna take a small amount and I'll probably end up doing this once the flywheel's mounted too, but this has a pilot bushing rather than a bearing, and this is where the tip of the transmission input shaft rides. And you don't want to put a lot of grease here too either, because again, it's spinning at pretty high speeds. So I'm just gonna rub that in, and then here on this spline, on this clutch disc, I'm literally just going to smear this in there, kind of roll it, smear it in. I'm gonna do the same thing on the input shaft. I've already test fit to make sure the clutch is going to slide onto the input shaft splines good without catching or snags or burrs, which you want to make sure to do. And what I do is I do that, and then I come over here and I do the same thing. I'm gonna rub this into these splines nice and good, get them in the grooves. And it may seem counterintuitive, but I rub them in as much as I can, and then I literally take my glove and I try to wipe off as much as possible. You don't need much. Then what I do, I take my alignment tool and I'm going to just work this in and out. This way I know that it's getting all the splines coated. Now, if you just left that grease in there, you can see how much builds up on the backside on that input shaft. And this is what will sling and coat the disc if you don't remove it. So I like to do this, coat it. I'm gonna take this and lay it down and wipe this off. And depending on how much grease is still there, again, I'm gonna take this disc and do the same thing. Just kind of wipe off this excess like this, set my tool down, take a rag, careful not to touch the disc or contaminate it with any of the grease, and I'm gonna wipe off this little bit on here. And if you wipe off a little bit on the splines in there, it's gonna be okay because that disc is gonna move. Now I'm gonna come over here and do the same thing. I'm just gonna kind of wipe off most everything that I put on there off the surface. And if you look, you can still see that there's grease in the splines. So once I do this, I'm gonna be confident that this is greased enough that it's not gonna bind the disc. And it's also not gonna be a comeback or a problem for the customer in the future, because I know there's enough that it's not gonna bind and it's not gonna sling it into the disc. Then the last thing I do is I take this disc, and I have a clean section on my glove, so I'm just gonna take this, and if I ever contaminate a glove, I'll switch it. But I'm just gonna take this disc, make sure that it slides nice and smooth, and then I'm gonna rotate it. Now I'm gonna do the same thing. Rotate it, same thing. Once I'm done with that, if I see any buildup on this disc, I'm just gonna take and wipe, and this is pretty good, so I'm just gonna wipe that little bit off there. I'm gonna flip it, wipe it off here. This is good to go. It doesn't take much, it's just a small amount of grease. When I put the flywheel in, I might take and wipe this input shaft just because it's a bushing. If it was a bearing, you really don't even lube them because the bearing itself is what's rotating. You don't want the shaft to rotate on the bearing, you want the bearing to rotate with the shaft. Okay, so I got the flywheel here and I got two bolts, two of the new bolts. These are ARPs. And we're gonna bring it up here. Make sure there's nothing on the back side. It's gonna be debris. I've already cleaned this surface and blown out the holes and made sure the threads are clean. And we're just gonna bring this up and get it lined up with the holes. Make sure it's flush on there. And kind of spin it. You should feel it's moving fairly easy. And I'm just gonna take and start two of these bolts. And I'm gonna snug them down by hand. Now, me personally, some people, again, depending on manufacturer, they may like for the Subaru ARPs, it actually wants you to use the Subaru Moly grease, not on the threads, only on the backside of the head. And then you actually use Loctite as a thread lubricant, but also to Loctite the bolts, the flywheel bolts. On this, it's not specified, but I'm going to Loctite it. That's just something common that I do. You could argue that it may change the torque, but these are ARPs. They have a high yield of torque before the fastener would fail. If you were really concerned about it, you could torque them dry, mark those bolts, and then remove the bolt, put your thread lock on it, and re-torque it. And if it's way off, which it won't be, it would probably be within, a very small margin, you could torque it that way up to those lines to make sure that, as long as you're using the same bolt in the same hole, you could do it that way if you were super worried about it. Me personally, I know that this is gonna be just fine. So I got those two bolts started. I'm gonna bring my flywheel bolts over. And Loctite sets up fairly quick. So you don't wanna just be putzing around. You wanna just put a small amount on that bolt. It really does not take much. It's hard to see because it's black, but it's just gonna go around that thread Loctite recommends one, for a general rule, Loctite, to seal a thread, you want one continuous thread of Loctite, and that's it. And then you're just gonna take these, and again, because we're kind of on a time crunch now that I've set this bolt into motion, that Loctite's gonna wanna start to harden up. So I'm going to put that one in and I'm gonna keep note on where my other ones are. And now that I know these two are in, it's gonna hold the flywheel in place. I'm gonna go ahead and remove these other two, put the Loctite on them. And the reason I'm doing two is so that I know that flywheel is seated against the crank and it's not gonna fall to the side or get pinched or wedge itself, and then potentially you torque it and it's actually not square to the crankshaft. So again, we're just gonna kind of move quickly here. Okay, so the instructions tell you to do a crisscross pattern. So we're just gonna start at the top here. And you could do like this torque's 91 foot-pounds. You could do like 40 and then continue. I normally just kind of snug them down to about what I know is about half. All right, now that I'm back at the top, I have the torque wrench set to 91. I got Ricky holding the crank, and we are going to bring this down until it clicks. Come to this one. Then we're gonna move one over and go to the opposite. And that is all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They all got lines. Okay, so now that we got the flywheel torqued and marked, we're gonna go ahead and clean the surface off with brake clean. I got goggles on. You know, this stuff burns, you get it in your eyes. I'm just gonna clean that off. This is a clean towel. Just gonna make sure that I don't have any grease on here. And then I'm gonna take a blower and blow these. You can see a little bit of the brake clean came out of there. I'm just gonna wipe that off. Make sure our disc, give it one final wipe, and now we're gonna get that alignment tool, clutch disc, and pressure plate lined up. All right, we got our pressure plate. I got 2 bolts. Again, we're gonna use those to get that lined up and set up there. Normally it's gonna say on this side, it would say transmission side, this side towards transmission. This one doesn't say it, but again, I know from doing so many clutches, or this would fit against the flywheel, that side's not. This is going to go just like this inside of that pressure plate, this side to engine. So we're gonna take our alignment tool, slip it in from here. I'm going to get this disc up here. Now this is the part that can kind of be dangerous. I've already lubed up that bushing, is getting this clutch disc up there and getting it lined up with the pressure plate can be, if you drop this, you're kind of shit out of luck. I don't know if I should say that.
Yeah, you can say that.
Yeah, so you want to get this lined up and make sure not to drop this disc. You're gonna have a real bad day if you drop that disc. And once this is lined up in the pilot, we're gonna push it forward. We're gonna take our pressure plate and come up and slip it over the top. Now there's dowels on the flywheel and on the pressure plate that you're gonna wanna line up. And sometimes they're not symmetrical. I believe this one is, but we will see. Okay, so that one's symmetrical. So now I'm gonna take my bolts. I'm gonna do the same thing as the flywheel. I'm gonna take these, I'm gonna start 2 of them, and then I'm going to Loctite the other ones, get them seated down, and we're gonna torque them in a crisscross pattern as well to the 19 foot-pounds. With a pressure plate though, you really wanna go in a couple turn increments as you go around. You don't wanna just tighten this down. This is a big spring and it's compressing against the disc. If you torque one side down, you could actually damage the pressure plate. Okay, so now I got all these basically hand tight. I'm gonna take the alignment tool and I'm gonna move the disc up and down and side to side. And as I'm pushing forward, I'm gonna try to find where the middle of this is. You kind of push up, down, find the middle. Then you're gonna go side to side, kind of find the middle of that. And make sure that the alignment tool is seated. Once it's here, now I'm gonna take and kind of hold the alignment tool, pushing against it slightly, and I'm just gonna go around and do a couple turns on each bolt. This way I don't tweak the pressure plate or cause any damage. And once all of these are seated by hand, or lightly with the ratchet, then you go and you do your final torque. All right, so we're gonna start at the top. Just gonna hold the pressure plate and get that to 19. And grab my Sharpie. Mark. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 6 bolts, 6 marks. Those are all torque. Now what we're gonna do is take this input shaft alignment tool. We're just gonna pull it out and slide it in. And it should go nice and smooth with no binding, no catching. And it should hit that bushing in there nice and smooth. That's gonna ensure that when we when we line up the transmission, that this input shaft is gonna go through the clutch disc and into the bushing and the flywheel. And I'm gonna go ahead and get this jacked up, and we'll show you how to align it without hanging the transmission. If you hang this transmission on that clutch disc, it's essentially going to put so much leverage on that disc and pull down, which can actually bend or warp the clutch disc. And if that happens, it's not gonna ride smooth on the input shaft. It's gonna wanna walk. And again, we're talking about, potentially 6,000 plus RPM. And as that walks, it's gonna basically vibrate, and that metal is going to be fatigued. And at some point, it's gonna fail, and it's gonna be catastrophic. That clutch disc will explode and come through the transmission housing, potentially into the cabin of the car, just because somebody puts it up there, doesn't have it lined, and lets it hang on the input shaft. It's probably the number one thing that's gonna kill a clutch as far as an install, that's gonna cause a catastrophic failure. Okay, so now we got this transmission jacked up, and as you're coming up, you wanna make sure you're not hitting anything, clutch lines, any harnesses or anything like that. Another thing you're gonna wanna look for is wires that may be hanging from above, or hoses. If this gets caught in there, you may bolt the transmission together with that wedged in there and not catch it. Of course, you're gonna damage your harness and your wires, but if you don't catch it, you might get halfway through the job and then realize, hey, I gotta take this thing back out and repair wiring. So just try to tuck anything out of the way. Zip ties are your best friend. We're gonna get this transmission lined up, and we're gonna use this trans jack and these knobs to get the transmission face lined up and parallel to the engine's mating surface. So I'm gonna come up like this. We kind of get it about close in height. I'm gonna look for my locating dowel here. I can see that, I know about where it's at. I'm still a little bit low, so I'm gonna come up with this jack. And as I come up and I get close, I'm gonna readjust my angle, and probably gonna have to go down just a tad. And we're gonna get that slipped in just like this. And come around this side, kind of get an idea of where I'm at. All right. You never want to force it. You want to get it. It should slide right in. So you see it's already almost there. Now I'm looking up for the dowel pin that's up here, and there's one on the front. And what I'm going to do, now that it's close, I'm going to try to rotate and get this lined up. And I'm going to use the jack again. Now, as you twist these jacks, it's going to change the height slightly. So just be mindful of that. You don't want to bind that input shaft. Now I got it here, really close. Just going to take and gently walk it in. Now is when you put bolts in it. If it doesn't go in smooth like that, a lot of people will take bolts and they'll bolt a bolt in there and impact it and just suck this transmission up. That's how you damage crankshafts. That's how you damage the clutch disc if it's not aligned right. Those splines going into the clutch disc. You come on this side, you can see clearly that case is butted up against that engine. That's how it should be. If it's not like that, you're not in. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get a couple of the bell housing bolts. We're gonna get those started, and snug them up. I try to do one on either side, about middle way, snug it up just to kind of hold it in place. And then I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of the bell bolts in place before I ever lower this jack. And then I'm gonna get them torqued to spec.